Okay, welcome everyone to our new webinar in the series. This webinar is called Exploring Integrated Energy Action Plans for a Sustainable Transition in the InSMART project, the cases of Cesena, Nottingham, and Évora. We welcome our presenters, Alessandro Chiodi, Rocco de Miglio, and Luís Dias. They will introduce the cases of the InSMART, which is the Integrative Smart City Planning Methodology, which was successfully tested within the 7th Framework Programme, Energy, of Horizon 2020, establishing and implementing a comprehensive methodology for enhancing sustainable planning, which addresses the current and future city energy needs through an integrative and multidisciplinary planning approach. They did so by involving relevant stakeholders and analyzing future building and transportation needs, also by using GIS tools and the times model for scenario analysis, and by discussing the project results with local politicians. This methodology was used to develop municipal energy plans in 4 cities of the EU: Nottingham in the United Kingdom, Cesena in Italy, Évora in Portugal, and Trikala in Greece. Thus, Alessandro, Rocco, and Luís will present in detail 3 of these 4 municipal cases of energy planning using the InSMART project methodology. Rocco Emilio is an energy system modeler and analyst at ESMA, Italy. He is an expert in the development and the application of decision support systems in the energy sector. As an energy system analyst and modeler, he works with different decision science techniques and tools in several countries. He coordinated the integrated modeling work at city level for the InSMART European project, and he has an extensive experience in European-funded technical assistance activities, European member states, Egypt, Ukraine, as well as policy analysis projects. Alessandro Chiodi, he is also an energy system modeler and analyst at ESMA, Italy. Alessandro has worked for over 8 years at the University College in Cork, contributing to the development of the Irish Times model, an integrated energy systems model of Ireland, and to inform on key energy and climate policy developments. Alessandro has been involved in all phases of the EU FP7 funded project InSMART, which brought together institutions, municipalities, and technical partners, universities and companies, to establish a common methodology for enhancing local sustainable planning through an integrative and multidisciplinary approach. And finally, Luís Pereira Dias, he's a researcher at the Center for Environmental and Sustainability Research from Nova University of Lisbon in Portugal. Luís is a PhD student in the PhD program on Global Studies, a joint program between the Faculty of Sciences and Technology and the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities, both from the University Nova of Lisbon. Throughout his research career at the Center for Environmental and Sustainability Research and within the Climate Change and Sustainable Energy Group, he has developed extensive experience in the analysis of impacts on the national energy system of new energy technologies in different climate change mitigation policy scenarios. For example, Low Carbon Roadmap Portugal 2050 project. He also has robust knowledge in energy, environment, economy, and modeling, and has worked on studies and technical support policy decision on atmospheric pollutant emission targets and on integrated analysis of climate and air quality policies. Please, during the webinar, you can leave your questions on the chat box for Rocco, Luís, and Alessandro to answer them by the end of their presentation. We will thus begin with Alessandro and the case of Cesena, then Rocco will introduce us the case of Nottingham and how the InSMART project was used, and finally, Luís will present the case of Évora. Once again, Rocco, Alessandro, Luís, thank you very much for being here. And Alessandro, in this case, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Tor, for this nice presentation. So as we said, the focus of this webinar today is to focus a bit more on the application. So basically, in the previous webinar, we have been discussing about the methodology which have been applied in the InSMART project, while today we would like to present at least 3 of of the 4 cities in which this approach have been applied. Can you see properly my screen?
Yes, we can see it, Alessandro.
Perfect. Okay. So in particular, I will present now some of the details about the case study of Cesena, while then my colleagues will focus on Nottingham in UK and Évora in Portugal. While we are introducing 3 different applications, is not to try to repeat three times the same things, because actually all these case studies are using basically the same methodological approach, but then the application, as you will see during the presentation, show that each of the case study will have some unique features that is driven by the real needs of the city and the characteristics and the policy interest of the local municipality. So let's go first of all to the case of Cesena. A brief introduction about Cesena. Cesena basically is a city which could be considered, at least in the Italian context, a kind of small to medium-sized city. Is around 100,000 inhabitants and is situated in the northeast of Italy. At the start of this project, the municipality of Cesena already somehow started this kind of political process toward sustainability. So basically, for example, the first big step for the city was the joining the Covenant of Measure program and developing a sustainable energy action plan for the year 2020. Then the next phase has been as well to join the Measure Adapt program, and right now is aiming and would like to commit to build a new action plan, an energy and adaptation action plan to the year 2030. So this was basically the starting point. So basically a city which already started its process and was a kind of open to try to apply a kind of different methodologies for a kind of sustainable energy planning. So as I've been discussed in the previous webinar, the core of the InSMART methodology is the development of a city planning platform, which is basically a platform which is composed by a number of tools and models, which can provide some useful information about the current status and trends of the city energy system, to many levels, so the infrastructure and the physical and as well the energy flows of the city. But as well, this type of tool can provide you some information about future projection, future trajectories, or of the key trends of the key indicator for energy in the city system. So basically, this type of tool can be used to try to test, for example, different implementation measures, different policy measures, to see which are the effects to the local energy system. Aside to this methodological approach that basically is common to all case studies that we applied, the key difference then is that, for example, the space granularity in each case study could be different. In the case of Cesena, we applied basically a space granularity of 15 15 zones, basically representing all the different districts across the city. What is basically, in this way, you can represent not only the overall trend of your city, but as well you are able to represent more in detail what's happening in the specific districts, or as well the type of flows, for example, the number of travels between different districts. And as well, another key important point for this application is the time granularity. This feature basically really depends by is really driven by the key interest of local stakeholders and the policy interest. And in this case, we adopted, for the case of Cesena, 24 intervals within the year. What does it mean, basically? Basically, this type of tools can assess what will happen in the future year from today to the year 2030, but can as well investigate, for example, the impacts of seasonal variation of some, for example, energy flows, or as well some day-night variation. So the changes, for example, of electricity consumption between the different time of the day. According to basically this tool, then the phase, the initial phase to start to develop a kind of analysis for the future trend for the city have been to the characterization and the identification of possible policy actions in the city. So basically we can summarize the identified action, for example, for the case of Cesena, into basically 5 big groups that could be grouped in terms of topic. So, for example, one of the key areas of intervention that was of interest for the municipality is, for example, action related to the urban regeneration. So basically, how retrofit certain amount of the existing stock and to assess which will be the impact to the overall energy dynamics. Another possible approach, for example, could be as well, okay, let's build new residential area, for example, and see what's happening in terms of energy patterns, but as well, for example, how will change the transportation, the mobility needs of the citizen across the city given this new urban area. And as well, some sensitivities. So what about if the new districts will have certain thermal characteristics, some specific characteristics in terms of energy consumption and energy saving. Other areas which have been identified of interest are, for example, in the transport sector, in which maybe there could be some action that could be, we can say, infrastructurally very heavy, as for example, what will happen if we will build new tram lines across the city. Just to let you know, basically, today there are only some public services with buses, so will be something completely new of introducing some tram lines. Or as well could be some, we can say, lighter measures, as for example, the realization of the completion, for example, of a number of cycling paths, the reduction of speeds of certain areas, and this type of measures. Other key area of interest have been as well, for example, some that are not strictly related to infrastructure changes or new investment, but maybe could be as well related just, for example, to a different organization or different behavior of people. So, for example, the municipality was interested, for example, to see what would happen if, for example, if we will increase by 10% the amount of work from home. So reducing the need of moving to go to work, to spend time there in this way, to see which would be the effect, for example, in the traffic patterns. Or as well could be some other action, as for example, the reduction of energy consumption given by, for example, information campaign. The last key topic, of course, have been as well the improvement, the increase of renewable generation across the city. So basically some distributed renewable generation in the system. So that could be by solar PV or other systems. A key word of the framework that have been developed within the InSMART project is that anyway, a key word is the integrated approach. So basically, the aim is not only to test a kind of cost-benefit analysis of these single actions, but the idea is to try to build some alternative planning hypotheses which are somehow integrated. So as you can see here from the list, basically there are 6 alternative planning hypotheses for the cities, and each of them has a kind of, we can say, of flavor. I mean, each alternative will have a kind of strong direction in a certain direction. So for example, the alternative A will be oriented more on the urban regeneration, but at the same time is including as well some other actions that are not only related to the urban regeneration. So for example, some measures in transport and some information campaign and so on. Once this type of scenarios have been identified for the cities, a key point was as well to try to evaluate how this type of planning hypothesis could perform under a certain amount of criteria. So for the city of Cesena have been identified 9 types of criteria which were found relevant to try to assess the different planning hypotheses and try to rank in order of importance this type of alternatives. We can identify between these 9 criteria basically few criteria which are completely quantitative, so you can measure, which is, for example, the impact of a certain measure in terms of the reduction of CO2 emissions, or as well, for example, the reduction or increase of particulate emissions and so on. But at the same time, there are some other criteria which were relevant for the municipality, which have been taken into consideration, even they could not be directly measured, but with a kind of rating, you can estimate which is the impact of them. So for example, which is the impact of certain hypotheses about of the local development, so the job creation of very high skilled people or not, or as well, for example, the impact of the architectonic and aesthetic of the new technologies across the city. As you can see, there are several steps and several definitions. So starting from the action, then the complexion of a set of alternative planning measures, and as well the identification of some criteria. A key important thing that I would like to underline in this last few slides is basically that all these steps are not being done by only technicians, that on our home we define which are the best projection, the best planning hypothesis, and so on. But actually, a key important aspect of this methodology is that in all these steps, there have been a process of stakeholder engagement for all the key actors of the municipality. So basically, the first key actor for the energy governance and the first key actor in this engagement have been for sure the municipality. So the municipality was completely part of the project, and it established a number of working groups with all the department all together, working together in order to provide information and guidance across all the steps of the project. Other key actors which have been involved are, for example, the local stakeholders, for example, the local university or professional orders and this kind of stakeholders, but as well few higher level stakeholders are, for example, regional level or national level, or for example, all the multi-utilities which provide services to the city. This engagement process has been through a series of technical workshops in which basically the detail of the project have been presented, but as well some discussion, some useful discussion and inputs were taken from all the participants of this technical workshop, and as well few political meetings with the key sector councillors and the city council, and as well to try to broaden as much as possible as well the dissemination, as well a dedicated website in Italian in this case, and a video clip and other activities have been done during all these steps. Anyway, at the end of the whole process, basically, the key output have been the definition of a mid-term implementation plan, which in this case is supported by a number of tools that can provide much richer information and details about all the trends, all the possible flows, and so on. But anyway, the key results of the analysis is for sure a number of set of key policies, very clear, very specific about the measure to apply and which are the possible and the expected achievement resulting from this type of policies for the city. Just to conclude, I would like to show this small list that basically has been written actually from the municipality of Cesena, and basically summarizes which are the key lessons learned and the key innovations according to the city of applying this type of methodology. So basically, what they found very important for them is that first of all, they felt like they were the key actor for this energy governance, and as well they found that this approach have pushed them to try to think in a different way the energy planning in terms of, often they are used to focus usually in the medium to very short term, so usually they look forward to 2 or 5 years and no more, and as well to try to push to think in an integrated manner, and to push actually different actors within the municipality to work together, that usually is not happening. And as well, key important thing is that often the energy planning is felt as something that come from the national level and then it downscale at local level. While with this approach, they felt that the urban planning could be transforming the energy planning in an integrated manner. So basically, these were the key point of the application of Cesena. What the next presenter, Rocco and Luís, will show about the other city, you will see that even the methodology is the same, then the application could change quite much between the different applications. So Rocco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alessandro. So with this second presentation, the main goal, as Alessandro said, is to complement some description of the methodology, making use of a different case study. So we're going to speak about the case of Nottingham here. Let me start from one very important point, the team who worked for the Nottingham case. As we said in the previous webinar, this methodology is integrated and actually engaged cities together with scientific partners. In particular, there are many actors which were involved for the case of Nottingham. You see here Sistra, which is a private company that was responsible for the transport analysis and played a role in the scenario analysis as well. The University of Nottingham, which was in charge of the simulation of buildings and the full coordination of the technical work with the City Council. So it was the buffer between the technical skills and expertise and the political part. and the Nottingham City Council, which was in charge of the GIS platform, plus was fully engaged in all the key steps of the work. All this kind of information, transport analysis, building, GIS, were used in a city planning platform, and my role, together with the help of Alessandro, what we did for Nottingham was to develop this city planning platform called City Energy System Model, and the key topic of this presentation is to talk about this energy system model for Nottingham. Let me just say that this is the first message that we want to share with you. If you want to fully apply the InSMART methodology, you have to make sure that at least you can cover some expertises in your team, transport related, building related, and modeling related. Few key information about Nottingham. The population is 3 times higher than the case of Cesena, meaning that the methodology itself is not limited by the number of people, by the number of inhabitants, is not limited by the size of the city, so it's pretty flexible to represent any kind of urban area. In this specific case study, we used a disaggregation of 20 zones, so 20 districts, but there was a very interesting characteristic. As you can see, there are inner, so a core part of the city, which is surrounded by this red circle, which is in fact the city of Nottingham, and is generally, let's say, geographical delimited by this area in terms of planning for building and for energy system in general. But as for the transport sector, the idea for them was to extend the geographical representation of the area, so that they could represent explicitly some of the measures for the transport sector. In particular, for example, the investment in some new tram lines or some new high-speed train. So there were 2 levels of analysis and 2 levels of models in this specific case study. One, as a first layer, is about the transport, very big, and one integrated transport plus building plus energy system in this blue area, so delimited by the red circle, which is much smaller in terms of geographical coverage. A few other characteristics of Nottingham with respect to the case of Cesena. The time granularity here was not very important, meaning that the local stakeholders were not very interested in analyzing the behavior of the energy flows within the year. So we worked with just 6 intervals within the specific years, just to keep track of the 3 general season and 2 points in the day, so 2 slots in the day. The end of the horizon is 2030 with a base year of 2014, so a time of analysis which is more or less 16 years. We identified 16 building typologies for the specific case of Cesena. And we also consider this additional planned housing because the idea is that the population is going to increase slightly in the coming years. As usual for the InSMART methodology, the centralized supply is not explicitly represented, so we control this information by quantity and prices, while the decentralized supply is fully represented. So we included the potential of solar and the investment also in these technologies, and all the elements of scenario which are related to this decentralized production of electricity and heat, so subsidies, taxation, and different programs. Again, another difference with respect to the case of Cesena. In this case, the space cooling service was not needed, meaning that according to the local experts, there is and there will not be any significant need for cooling in the residential sector. So we simply consider this service as negligible. So we didn't consider this service in the model. While the private transport sector was very well represented because it's a key issue for them. You can see here, you can find in this slide a couple of detailed information. There's an average distance of 7 kilometers per person per day. And another point is that the non-residential sector as well as the industry the non-residential in particular was represented in a very simplified way, while the industrial sector was not represented at all. But this is again consistent with the general approach of the InSMART project. Few more details that you can find here in these charts. In the first one, you can see the dwelling stock by typology divided by 20 zones, so and by dwelling types, so flat, detached, semi-detached, and terraced. We were also able to break down the heating system, the stock of the heating system by zone and by type, to divide the dwelling stock by period of construction in order to better simulate the energy performance of these buildings, and to, of course, to break down the consumption by fuel and by zone. So this is just to say that such level of detail was used for describing the base year of the municipality, as well as the future dynamics of the municipality. So the definition of the zone and this level of details in representation of the processes was kept along the entire horizon of analysis. But here is the key part of our activity. This is the Nottingham scenario matrix. So as Alessandro said, the integrated system model, the energy system model, is a test bed, meaning that we develop this tool in order to let them play with some assumption, with some scenario, and to combine different assumptions in order to get the feeling and quantitative information about what is the most performing scenarios according to some criteria. But look at this table in particular, because it's interesting to notice how they combine the scenarios and how they build the scenarios. By column, you see some of the actions that the local people decided to test making use of this framework. For example, work from home, the subsidy and the penetration of domestic PV and solar thermal technologies, the subsidy for residential retrofit, the penetration of electric buses and specific new infrastructure, and so on. So individual action or individual projects that actually we were able to explicitly represent in this modeling framework. And by row, you see the specific meaning of the scenario. For scenario, we mean alternative planning hypothesis. So in the first case, for example, called LL low cost, the idea was just to take into consideration 2 actions, while for the others, the idea was to include other extra actions in this scenario. This is a very key difference with the standard approach of downscaling, because here we are not setting any targets about the reduction of CO2, for example, or about the reduction of energy consumption in the municipality. We are just asking the local stakeholder to identify some actions or measures or projects, to list them, to characterize them, and we simulated the impact of these projects and the combination of these projects in one scenario. This is a focus on the building. As I said before, the building is one of the key, building sector is one of the key components of this simulation. In particular, what I want to highlight here is that 4 types of retrofit measures were explicitly simulated by the University of Nottingham and were completely simulated even within the integrated energy system model. In particular, solid wall insulation, cavity wall insulation, roof insulation, and draft proofing. But the key issue is we are not approaching the simulation by forcing the penetration of such retrofit measure. We are just applying a tool, an instrument, which can be, for example, the subsidy, just to see as a result, not as an assumption, what is the actual penetration of such retrofit measure. And you can see here in this table different assumptions and different ideas about level of subsidies for specific retrofit measure. This percentage means that the subsidy is able to cover 25% in the first case of the investment cost for the retrofit R1, meaning that the actual cost for the household is 75% of the real cost. So here are just explicit assumptions about tools, subsidies, or taxation, which actually could be tested making use of our tool. Again, the message is that the shares and the penetration of these retrofit measures are endogenously calculated and determined based on the different level of subsidies. Once we prepare this list of alternative planning hypotheses, meaning combination of different actions or measures in one consistent story, the idea was to run all the simulations and to get a set of quantitative information. The first 5 criteria are basically fully inherited by the runs of the integrated energy system model. So 2 of them are purely economic related, so cost associated to a scenario over the projected time horizon, and the cost efficiency in terms of decarbonization potential, in terms of dollar per tons of CO2. 2 of these criteria are purely energy related, so the energy reduction potential related to the scenario and the low carbon energy generated, meaning, for example, the production of electricity from PV. And the 5th is more environmental oriented, which is about the reduction of carbon CO2 emission. But the local stakeholders decided not to use only quantitative information for ranking the alternative planning hypotheses, and you can see here a list of qualitative criteria: technical constraints, social acceptability, legal issues, economic impacts on the city, and quality of life issues. Those criteria were measured by looking at some expertise, local expertise, so in a full consultation with the local stakeholders. So again, the first part of this criteria was fully inherited by the results of the city energy system model, while the second part, which is still very important, from the stakeholder consultation. Now, the first element that I want to share is that many times we believe that the CO2 emission is very important, probably the most important criterion for the planning exercises. Well, based on this experience, what we can say from Cesena and from Nottingham is that when we ask local stakeholders to assign a weight, to put some coins, for example, on this criteria, CO2 emission reduction is never the first criterion for taking a decision, which doesn't mean that we should avoid to consider this indicator. On the opposite, the idea is that we should use as a tool all their indicators, all their criteria, in order to get some benefit also in terms of CO2 reduction. But we will talk about this point even in the coming slides. So what we did was to test 7 alternative planning hypotheses for Nottingham, and this LLG, local leadership growth, this is the name of the planning hypothesis, was selected by the local people and actually is taking forward now. Again, I want to divide this is the list of the action included for this scenario, and again I want to divide this list in 3 main areas. The first one in red is about energy, to assist residents in increasing energy efficiency in the building sector in particular, development of zero or low carbon housing, or support local householders to reduce their energy use by installing insulation. So you see 3 actions which are related to energy, and in particular to energy in the building. The second set is the green one, is about energy outside the building. So upgrade the district heating network, encourage the setting up of biomass combined and power generators for local communities, and install large-scale solar energy generation. All these actions and all these projects were fully captured and simulated within the energy system model. And the third set of action was more oriented to the renewables or to non-fossil fuels. So the idea was, or in particular in this case for the transport sector, so incentive schemes to support the electric vehicles, to double the price of car parking in the city center in order to, let's say, reduce the willingness of people to use the car in the city center, and to convert the city bus fleet to electric vehicles, plus an upgrade to the city cycle network. So this is the set of actions which was ranked as the best in this comparison of scenarios, which actually is a comparison of alternative planning hypotheses. And what are the expected achievements by 2030 of this combination of action? I like to say combination of actions because this is not an analysis of standalone action or standalone measures. The idea is that those actions have some synergies, there are some feedbacks, mutual feedback, and what we are testing is the simulation of individual measure, but together in one unique problem, one unique decision support system. So what are the main expected achievements by 2030? Here you see the expected energy savings in the building sector, 650 terajoule. In the transport sector, 3,000 in the city, which basically means the inner part of Nottingham. But if we include the remaining parts surrounding the center, is up to 4,400. And a reduction of CO2 emission from the base year, which is 2014, of around 21%, and a variation of CO2 emission per capita, just consider that the population is expected to increase in Nottingham, which is about 28.5% of reduction. The biggest potential of reduction is it comes from the transport sector, in particular from the reduction of the use of private cars. Now, let me spend few words just to open the discussion with you about this specific number, 21.17% of reduction of CO2. For your information, the national target of UK is to reduce the CO2 emission of 57% with respect to the level of 1990 by 2030, which basically means to reduce the emission by 2030 of around 35% with respect to the year 2014, just to have the same base year of the national target. So what can we say now? The national target is around 35, and here at city level, we reached 21. So what can we conclude? But well, we don't want to conclude at this moment. What we want to say is that this is a tool for the municipality to tell and to talk with the national government and to other level of governance, saying this is a well-organized set of actions that we can put in place. And this is the effort in terms of cost, in terms of emission reduction, in terms of energy that we can, let's say, guarantee to the nation. There are probably other sectors which are not covered here, for example, the bulk generation of electricity, meaning the centralized generation of electricity, or the industry, which may contribute more. But a good bottom-up strategy for Nottingham is able to reduce 21% of CO2 with respect to the base year in 2014. This is not negligible at all, because we are not considering two of the most pollutant sectors of the energy system: generation of electricity, bulk generation, plus industry. So what we want to say is that we are totally approaching a different way the planning exercise at the city level, from the bottom and not from the top. Let's imagine to use a standard downscaling approach. So we want to obtain the same reduction, 35% of reduction of CO2 from 2014 to 2030 in Nottingham, just using the same national level. What we miss in this context is that, first of all, this is probably not consistent, because even the best solution is not able to cover this huge amount of reduction. And second, this is not participatory at all, because this idea of downscaling the targets doesn't take into consideration the actual room for reducing the CO2, which each city and each sector really have. So this is just to say that we want to stress the fact that our approach is exactly the dual one, is the opposite one comparing to the downscaling approach. And we really believe that this works much better in the sense that it gives the possibility to the municipality to talk with the other level of governance and to show them what is the actual possibility for reducing CO2. This final slide is about the lesson learned and the key innovation. These are not my words. These are words from the city council, so from the local people, but are also very important because allows us to think about the possible differences between the standard approach and our approach. The first one is that national data sets generally are misleading. What is the meaning of this statement? If you look at the left side chart, you'll see the distribution of energy consumption by district in Nottingham as it was before, as it was assumed before this project, meaning that they usually use some national-wide indicators, and then they apply these national-wide indicators to the district. On the right side, you see the energy consumption by district after we engaged the local people and after we made all the simulations. You see the pictures are completely different. So again, national data sets might be very misleading in energy planning. The second comment is that data to enable more effective targeting of projects are very important. So of course, these tools are data greedy, but every time you have to use a bottom-up tool, a data greedy tool, you have to make a good effort. And the good effort is to try to know better the system you are trying to plan. The third point is about the municipal working group. They say that this approach of bringing together a scientific partner plus different sectors within the municipality and different expertise within the municipality was pretty effective. As a general response of our analysis, they say that there's a confirmation of Nottingham's strategic energy direction, but a more robust, let's say, a quantitative outcome which actually they could use. And one of these outcomes is that based on our analysis, there's a very important need of investment for the private rented housing. And based on this finding, they are starting to commit on fuel poverty reduction strategy. I think you all know about what is fuel poverty. Maybe we can even discuss in the Q&A part of the webinar about this indicator. But this is a very important issue in UK and in general in Europe. And they used this outcome in order to, let's say, validate their original idea of committing about fuel poverty reduction. Another comment was that MCDA, so multi-criteria decision analysis, is effective once understood. So it takes not that much time, but a bit of training, but in the end it's pretty effective. And the remaining two comments are about the use of these results and the use of the methodology. They are going to use for post-2020 the InSMART results for the future SEAP. And there is another national project, Scatter, which covers many cities in UK. And the InSMART methodology is considered as one of the possible methodology to be used for this new national-wide project. Here you can find, I just reported the link where you can find the deliverables for Nottingham, but at the same links, you can find also deliverables for Cesena and for Évora. And that's it from my side. I think that, Luís, now you can start your presentation about Évora.
Hello. Everyone can.
Yes, but we hear you with an echo from your own audio.
Now it's okay?
Yes, now it works perfectly.
Okay. Now I'm sharing my screen. So just to, I want my key objective of this presentation. I will try to be a little faster because we have take some time, and I want to just to present some of the application of the InSMART methodology to the municipality of Évora. First of all, I want to acknowledge all the colleagues of the project, and now I will start it. I will pass the agenda. Now, Évora is one of the four cities that were part of the project. Here I want to present the particularities and the details that make Évora different from the other case studies, and also to show how the flexibility of the methodology that can be applied for different size cities with different characteristics. So first of all, I want to show where is Évora. Évora is located in the interior of Portugal. Is around 130 kilometers from Lisbon, from our capital, and is a United Nations Patrimonial and Cultural World Heritage. It's a very nice place to be. I invite everyone to visit. Just to notice, I'm not sponsored by the tourism department, but I just want to point out that the city is very beautiful to visit. In terms of dimension, Évora municipality has around 45,000 inhabitants, so is more or less half of the population of Cesena. And one of the very particular characteristics of Évora municipality in the case of the application on this project is the fact that it is a municipality, and so it includes also a huge area of rural characteristics. So in the municipality of Évora, more than half of the total area of the municipalities is covered with rural areas. You can see here a map on the low. Here is Évora. Why also Évora is important in terms of smart city? Évora has been taken off for several studies on smart cities, and in the scope of one of the projects is called InnovCity Évora from EDP, that was also a partner of the InSMART projects. And the InnovCity Évora was equipped with 33,000 smart meters. For those that don't know what the smart meter is a device that allows to register the electricity consumption in 15 minutes periods. And allow us, in the scope of the InSMART projects, allow us with a huge amount of information that allow us to make very robust assessments and use a lot of information to feed on the main tool of the project. Also, a very important characteristic concerning the rural area of Évora is that it is different from the other cities on the project, is that this area make possible to install utility scale renewable energy plants, in this case of solar PV. Solar PV, in fact, is very important for this region, as the figures show, because Évora is located in one of the highest solar irradiance area of Portugal, and even in Europe. In this figure, in this Sankey diagram, is my key objective is to present the energy system of Évora and it represents, in a very simplified way, the energy model that was introduced and applied to the city. So it characterized the energy system of Évora from the supply side to the final energy consumption sectors that are presented here, like transport, agriculture, industry, residential sector, also the services. And also very important for the municipality teams are the characterization of the other sectors, like public lighting and also the water and waste system that are managed by the city. A very important feature of the model was it was able to characterize the buildings, the service buildings managed by the municipality. Although when we look at the representativity of the buildings managed by the municipality in terms of energy consumption to the overall energy consumption of the city, although it's very small, it is important for the municipality to have these buildings characterized, because are the buildings that they can have some impacts and put direct measures on it. But this Sankey diagram of Évora is just to present the flows of energy that are represented in the city. Here I want to present in a very simplified way the components of the Times Évora model that was developed under the projects. It included the transport sector, the buildings, and the buildings were divided in residential, commercial, and also municipality managed, and also the public service, as I said in the previous slides, and also characterize the energy supply, the energy that was supplied to the city, and also the industry and the agriculture sector. In terms of spatial and geographical representation, for the case of Évora, it was defined 4 regions, 3 urban, majority urban focus region zones that are located here, and one big region that represented the rural part of the city. In terms of time slices and temporal scales that were applied to the model, it was defined 18 time slices representing the 3 seasons: summer, winter, and interseasonal, and also weekdays and weekends, and divided in day-night peak. And like Rocco said, for the other 2 cities, this is very important to characterize in terms of energy consumption and also energy production. Here I present 2 examples why this is important. So the model can gather the complementarity of energy supply and the energy consumption sectors. Here it can be seen an example of the PV, the electricity production, and electricity consumption profile of the residential sector. This can represent and try to analyze the complementarity between production and consumption. And here also we managed to characterize the energy consumption profile for other economic sectors. Just to point out, here is a very good example on the importance of the information that we gather from the smart meters, and because this was a big data, so it takes a lot of time to analyze it, but from this it was possible to have real consumption profiles by each of the sector. Another very important aspects when we are talking about energy, renewable or sustainable energy futures for the cities is to analyze what is the renewable energy and the endogenous potential of the cities. In this matter, under the scope of the project, it was made an assessment of the renewable energy source potential in all of the 4 cities. But here I present an example of Évora, and in specific, in the left figure, we analyze the PV at the utility scale potential. So the municipality of Évora had the possibility to implement these systems at this scale. So a very good assessment was made on this, trying to take into account some of the land use restrictions. And just to point out that Évora now has more or less like 1 megawatt of PV installed potential in utility scales, and the potential for utility scale implementation in Évora is 1 gigawatt. So more or less the electricity consumption made by the city can be guaranteed by the installation of PV. Also, it was made an assessment on the PV rooftop potential in Évora, and it was made also divided in different regions and also between different building typologies. So these allow us to identify in very detailed way the PV potential for each of the buildings and in each of the regions. Here I just want to zoom in the building sector, in particular the residential sector, where last week I presented a webinar on the data collection, and one of the key methods that was applied to gather some information on the residential sector was the door-to-door surveys. And here I just want to emphasize that the fact that these door-to-door surveys were very exhaustive, so 110 questions that they go with building characterization to the building occupancy characteristics, and also the technology owns. These allow us to make a very robust characterization of the residential sector, and we divided the houses by 10 building typologies, and also we use some of the other information in terms of percent per household or level of income to make some restriction or make some adjustments on the measures that we wanted to test it. Here is to show the modeling approach that was made. Like I was saying, there were designed 10 building typologies defined by the building characterization, and for each of the building typology and in each of the 4 city regions, it was characterized in terms of technology ownership, from all these types of technologies, from refrigerators to dishwashers, and even in each of these technologies, it was divided in energy efficient classes and by type of wall. Why this is important? Because these types of model are very technology rich. So when we make some scenarios for 2030, it takes in account the current stock of technologies and looks in the replacement of these technologies with the portfolio of new technologies in terms of investment costs and also efficiency. So if in the base year in 2013, one building typology have a refrigerator that is very low in energy efficient classes, in 2030 can be replaced by a more efficient one. And also very important was the characterization of the mobility. The mobility was linked to the building typologies in terms of characterization of the type of technology that each of the households have. And this make the technology, the characterization in terms of technology by type of fuel and by age. And also with the information gathered from the service made for the mobility analysis, was possible to point out the origin and destiny of the people that live in these houses. So more or less it was very detailed and it was able to make some assessments of make some adjustments on the mobility of the people that go to the city center, and if they have cars, then the city center is constrained to this specific type of cars, and what was the choice that people had in this matter. So just to point out the visions that were developed for Évora, is also important to point out that all these visions and all the scenarios and all the measures that were made under these projects were always, and I will present in a few next slides, were always taking in consideration the opinions and the feedbacks of the municipality teams or the local teams, and also the stakeholders of the city. This was not made purely in terms of technical sides from the universities or the technical partners. It was taken in consideration what are the opinions of the local stakeholders in terms of what are the visions for the municipality in the future in 2030. So with this said, we made two different visions for Évora. One is the reference, and the other one is a smart Évora vision. In one, the reference is very more pessimistic perspective for Évora, where the population decreases. There is no change on energy consumption profiles, although there is a new commercial mall in the city that is very important for the municipality population. So you can see here the new commercial mall is not one thing that was a technical aspect, was a local feedback. And also in the opposite, we have the smart Évora vision, where the resident population is stable till 2030. The population is very local population is very important. Is a component that is very important in terms of vision at the local level, because they in specific for Évora, because they have some population decrease, and they want to stable or even increase it. So under these two visions, here are some examples of the measures that were tested for Évora. It was 22 measures that were tested for Évora. It was the highest city the highest number of measures tested under this project. From different, taking in consideration different sectors. Here I put some examples, but I just want to point out the flexibility of the tool, because since we represent all the city sectors in terms of, and all the city energy system, it allows us to test different aspects or different measures, from restrict cars in cities, historical centers, to reduce 50% of the energy consumption, or try to implement zero energy building in specific sectors, or change all the public lighting to 100% LED. And so this just shows the flexibility of the tool. Here I just want to present some results. I don't want to go in detail. If you want, we can go through it. But here I just want to present some of the results that the tool provided. So here we have the CO2 emissions in the time frame of the model. The model can be applied to 2050. Here it was applied to 2030, and here the two scenarios that were tested. So since we have the geographical granularity for 4 regions, we can see the results at region scale. And also we have the different sectors. So here are the energy consumption in 2030 and in 2030 in the different scenarios, and we can see the change in all the scenarios. A very important aspect on the InSMART methodology was the inclusion of the local stakeholders. The engagement of the stakeholders was taken in various workshops, and the workshops were first of all to define the future technology and measures towards a low carbon city, and also try to validate these measures, and also and very important in fact was the fact to analyze the criteria that allow us to rank the different measures. And like Rocco and Alessandro showed, the criteria are different between cities. For the case of Évora, it was defined 6 criteria, from quantitative to qualitative. In terms of quantitative, is like reduction of energy consumption, greenhouse gas emission, and financial effort, because the tool allows us to see the amount of investments that is needed for specific measures, and also some qualitative in terms of contribution for improvement of comfort or quality of life of the residents. This criteria was also was provided by the local stakeholders, and also the width of each of the criteria was also provided by the stakeholders. This allowed to just make a rank of the more important measures or the more feasible measures or more realistic measures to the case of Évora. And finally, I just want to point out some of the lessons learned. Again, these lessons were pointed out by the municipality technical teams or the policy teams, and just to point out, they said it was very important to detail and map the solar, thermal, and PV technical potential of the city. Also, the identification of consumers in terms of potential energy poverty situation. This is a very, very important aspect that they mention. And also have some mobility analysis and see how the investment of some planned infrastructure can impact in terms of mobility. And also in other aspects of lessons learned are the involvement of external stakeholders in the energy planning process of the city, because previously was only made by municipality staff. And also it will allow us to the energy system plannings of the city to thinking ahead about energy consumption in an integrated energy system. So like I presented the Sankey diagram in the energy, every energy flows, that was very important for them to know where the energy is consumed and where it comes from. So this is some additional information. The more detailed information is available in the project book and also in the working package deliverables. Here are the links, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis, for the presentation. Thanks also to Rocco and Alessandro. As mentioned, you can please write your questions in the chat box, and the presenters, according to their own presentation, will read them and then reply to them. Though I have been having already a question that you will mention, Rocco, during your presentation on the issue of fuel poverty and how it is meant to be exactly addressed, because always there are different cases. One thing is to address the issue of fuel poverty in Nottingham, and a very different one, I guess, it's to address it in Ukraine or in the same Cesena or Évora in these particular cases. But with that, I will leave you to address the questions as they come to.
Okay, just few words about this point. There is no official definition of the issue. So fuel poverty is defined in a way in UK, and then they also changed the exact definition is defined in a different way in other countries in Europe. It's not defined exactly in Italy, for example, and there are many member states which actually don't have a recognition at all of the issue. They prefer to recognize this phenomenon as a generic poverty, so not fuel poverty. So it's pretty hard to give an answer which is generic enough and robust enough. What I can say is that there are two main issues which are for sure important component of the phenomenon. The first one, which is a more short term, is the affordability of the energy in the households. So one way generally to cope with this is to subsidize energy, but we all know that this is a very short term, and also that there might be a rebound, in the sense that once we have subsidized fuel, electricity or whatever, or gas, there's a trend, or at least there's a possibility to experience some increase of consumption, which is even not justified. Or, for example, a lowering in the substitution with high efficiency technologies, because as you all know, as much as you can experience the price signal, as much as you are willing to try to save energy and maybe to invest in some efficiency. So short-term subsidies, long-term is more about programs for retrofit or of let's say buildings which are cost effective to be retrofitted, for example, or buildings in the area which are more lived by low income people. There's another point which is more about regulation. I don't know whether you have heard about this landlord-tenant dilemma. The meaning is that when there are some rented houses, exactly the case of Nottingham, for example, the willingness to invest of the owner is pretty low. So they are trying to combine different tools, subsidies plus information campaign, in order to push these owners in make the necessary retrofit and, let's say, build a different configuration of the housing stock, in particular of the housing stock which is rented now. So just to wrap up, there is no unique solution, there is no unique definition even about the phenomenon. There are short-term and more long-term way to address the point and to tackle the point. It's very city-specific, it's very country-specific.
I see. Thank you, Rocco. Generally speaking, because the project finished in 2016, since then, has there been any sort of a follow-up on how the three cities in this case have been acting regarding the results of the InSMART methodology that the project provided for them?
I will talk about Nottingham. As I tried to mention in my presentation, they are going to use for the next strategic energy action plan for the data post-2020, the results of our simulation. And they are going to discuss the possibility to use the methodology set, so the framework, in a national-wide project, which is a city level, but so to share the experience for several cities. So the idea, I mean, the feedback that we have is that, at least for Nottingham, for example, there's a good recognition of the value of this methodology and the possibility to use them. Alessandro will say something more about Cesena now.
Yeah, about Cesena, actually the idea already from the end of the project was at least to use this sustainable energy action plan to basically approve this as well by policy, so making this a kind of regulation, a kind of planning document for the city. So the first step will be to use what already have been developed for as a starting point for any further analysis. About then possible follow-up, actually during the project there have been several type of tools and as well a kind of particularity of the city of Cesena that is leading a group of other municipalities, and at least for some of the tools which have been developed for the city, for example, all the information collected with the GIS tool, this type of information, the idea were to kind of provide this type of knowledge as well to the other municipalities around the city of Cesena. So as well, the lesson learned and as well the competencies that are embedded in the city, just to try to make use of them as well for other municipalities. Yeah, probably as well, Luís maybe can give you some information about Évora and maybe as well to other application, other projects.
Yeah, in fact, the use of the project, the direct use in Évora was the revision of the SEAP, the Sustainable Energy Action Plan for the city. This was part of the project, and the technical team of the municipality also used some of the information in terms of economic and financial information in order to gather some funding for the application of the projects. It was a case of the public lighting, so they use some of the impacts on changing the public lighting technology, and also the necessary amount of investments that was used, that was necessary to do it. And another aspect that is not focused only on the Évora municipality is the follow-up a follow-up project that is called Sure City, that also uses this type of models to characterize the city and energy system. So it was also, in terms of technical part, a very good example.
Thank you very much, Luís. Alessandro, Rocco. I don't know if we have other questions from the participants. I know that it has been an extended webinar, unlike the other ones, but well worth it to review the cases and how the InSMART methodology that was presented already twice by the same presenters in the last couple of weeks was properly applied on city cases. Let's give 1 more minute to see if we have questions, or if not, perhaps we should start closing the session, because I know that the people have also to go back to work in a way. Well, very well. So I think that it's good for now. Alessandro, Rocco, Luís, I think that we should start calling it today. We wanted to really thank you for this presentation and for your time. For all the participants, this presentation has been recorded. The presentations themselves will also be available for you to follow all the links. They will be available at our website. We will be sharing, as usual, the links with you, and we really appreciate your attendance to the webinars. And if you could please take a couple of minutes of your time to answer and fill in the survey link I've just posted in the chat. Alessandro, Rocco, Luís, thank you very much for your time. It was a really nice presentation from the three of you, as usual, and it was a pleasure having you here with us.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
It was my pleasure, and to everyone, thank you very much for coming. Have a great day. Bye bye.
You too.